Good morning and welcome everybody to this next topic in our HR webinar series. My name is Garrett Cleaver and I'm with Josie Velasco this morning. We're both from HR and we're here to discuss performance reviews and how to write effective performance reviews and performance reviews in Workday. Some of this is written to the perspective of the supervisor, someone who is actually in charge of developing that performance review, but many of the topics will be applicable to an employee themselves and how they can best prepare for the performance review. Namely, we're going to talk about timing and preparation, how to prepare for this performance review process, goal setting, how to avoid biases in the performance review process, and at the end I'll do a live demonstration of some of the goal functions and performance review functions in Workday. But before we get into it, performance reviews are probably not the most exciting or fun subject, and there might be some reasons for that. So take a moment and think to yourself, what are some negative stereotypes around performance reviews? What is it about the performance review process that might cause anxiety or stress, or may otherwise have someone look at this as something that, it's something they have to do, it's just a checkbox, something that they need to do every single year and can be kind of a chore. Now, there are probably some good reasons for this. Supervisors may not like giving feedback to those with whom they work. Managers may be hesitant to give unfavorable performance feedback. I think everybody in the process might recognize that this performance review is documented, and some of that documented performance may be constructive feedback, and that could go on somebody's record. And within state government, there are few rewards for taking their review process seriously. Perhaps if you have private sector experience or another organization that had a different performance review process, that performance review might have been tied to a bonus, to a raise, or some other sort of incentive process. Now, of course, our incentive in state government is to help somebody with their career, document those things that are going to help them be successful, and have that documented discussion on performance and feedback, again with this forward-looking approach to help someone improve and set them up for success. So there are definitely some intrinsic rewards there. But there are some ways to get around some of these barriers, some of these negative stereotypes, and that comes down to effective preparation and timing, and also setting effective goals. So we're going to talk about what does an effective goal look like, and maybe kind of a different approach than you may be used to have heard before that may help these goals become even better throughout the year. And of course, we're talking about a performance review process, so feedback is critical. What is the actual feedback that we're giving to each other, that managers are giving to employees? That's actually going to be helpful. But we also know that there are some potential biases in the performance review process. Some of these are unconscious biases. So how do we recognize that? How do we notice these? And how do we address those so the performance review process can be as effective and rewarding as possible? So when it comes to timing and preparation, of course, preparation is key for the performance review process. I've certainly been in the situation of being in charge with delivering somebody's performance feedback and not doing the amount of preparation I needed to throughout the year. And when it comes to that one time in the year, I'm scrambling, I'm asking my subordinate for what they've done in the past year. I'm trying to remember what happened 6 to 12 months ago and trying to basically put together everything that's happened in the past year, while at the same time thinking about what the next year is going to look like. So that preparation is key. So it's important to document performance throughout the review process. If you're a supervisor, if you're going to be actually conducting the performance review, that might mean having some regular check-ins with employees. These could be quarterly, these could be monthly. That'll depend on the person and the job. But really you want to have these regular check-ins so you can document performance throughout the review period. And during these check-ins, it's important to have genuine intentions. Again, intending for a forward-looking approach, intending for goal setting, intending to set somebody up for success. And that will ultimately make this performance review conversation easier and more effective. We're talking about documentation here, and in Workday we can certainly do that. But really the key piece is, once that's happened, what does that conversation look like when a supervisor and an employee are sitting next to each other going over the performance review? And if you're an employee and you're going to have a performance review yourself, you can do your own documentation. What have you done throughout the performance review period? Again, that's typically a year, or it might be 6 months if you're on a trial service period. And what can you do to have the conversation be easier and more effective? What is your intention walking into that performance review conversation? And have you and your supervisor discussed that? What do you both want to get out of this process? And finally, asking questions is important to, again, help set somebody up for success. As a supervisor, you want to ask questions to prevent or avoid the perception that you're lecturing. And again, you want to make this kind of a forward-looking process. You are documenting the performance through the review period, what's happened, what were the standards, what were the goals, how were they met. But you also want to take a forward-looking approach. What does the next year look like? And when it comes to this regular feedback, nothing discussed in a formal performance review should be a surprise. That's why these regular meetings are key. And that's why managers should meet individually with each member regularly. Again, that could be quarterly, could be monthly. The important piece is that there is a regular check-in. Their goals are discussed, where those goals are, how somebody's doing, and how feedback is delivered. Again, nothing discussed in this formal performance review process should be a surprise. And that means that you're going to spend a lot more time in a forward-looking approach setting goals for the next year rather than concentrating on what happened in the past. But we think we have a way to make those goals a little bit smarter.
All right, so you've probably heard about SMART goals, and that is just outlining what is your goal, how are you going to achieve it, and what is the time frame of your goal. But the smarter piece of this framework really takes your goals to the next level. So with the evaluate piece, this really speaks to reflecting on your goals on a regular basis. So maybe if you are setting a goal for a month, every week you're going to evaluate your progress. Okay, I'm flying out of the water with my goal here. Maybe I need to make it a little bit more challenging, or wow, I'm really struggling. Really evaluating myself, cutting back a little bit would help me to be more successful. So that is super key. And in contrast to the review piece, this is more on a daily basis. 3 times a day, trying to remind yourself, oh yeah, what was my goal again? How am I going to achieve it? What am I doing? Maybe this looks like putting a sticky note on your computer, maybe a reminder on your phone. However that looks for you, taking the time to consistently acknowledge your goal will help you be more successful. Really we want to emphasize the evaluate and review piece of setting your goals. Again, you want to make sure that they are specific and measurable and timely and all of those things as well. But the last 2 pieces maybe not everybody knows about, and they will help you to be successful with your goals. So let's take a few minutes to actually kind of review what do some goals maybe look like. If you have any questions during this time, please feel free to put them in the question box, but let's just discuss it. So the goal is I want to drink more water, and you might realize, hey, this is not very specific. Yes, it does discuss, okay, you want to drink water, but how much water are we talking about? What is the time frame here? This is a good desire to have, but in order to be successful with this, you probably want to make it more specific. Okay, so we have the next one, and it says, I want to drink 96 ounces of water each day. So this is a step up from the last one. You do say, I want to drink 96 ounces of water each day. However, is this realistic? I know for me, 96 ounces of water is not achievable. And, this might be a really great goal to have, especially if, you are super active, or maybe it's the summer and it's really hot and you just need to drink more water. But you might want to start out on a bit more of a realistic approach and then kind of build up to this. So starting out, you might want to think about how articulating your goal could be smarter. Okay, so now we have, I drink 64 ounces of water each day by drinking 8 ounces of water each hour for 8 hours. So you might notice this one is the strongest goal of all. It is a bit more realistic with, that 64 ounces. You outline exactly how you're going to do it. Maybe you will incorporate the review piece by setting a reminder each hour that says, hey, you need to drink your water. Maybe you have a water bottle that measures out exactly 8 ounces. You follow that. But again, we want to remember to evaluate our progress. At the end of the week, hey, how many days have you been successful? Maybe you're only able to drink 64 ounces 2 or 3 days out of the week. Maybe you need to cut that back a little bit. Or, hey, I only missed 1 day where I didn't drink 64 ounces. Hey, I'm doing pretty good. This is a pretty good goal for me, and I'm just going to keep it the way it is. So just remember to go that extra mile, take that extra step to make sure that you are successful.
Now, when it comes to goals and the performance review process, of course, effective feedback is key. And feedback through this process, and I would tie this especially to the goal piece, should be about identifying strengths and successes and asking somebody to improve or maintain their behavior based on continued use of strengths. And I think this applies whether you are in that position as a supervisor to give feedback to somebody, and also just as employees ourselves. We're going to go and tackle our work, tackle our goals, and we're not just getting feedback from our supervisors, we're getting that from our coworkers, our colleagues on projects, and we're also delivering that same feedback. But really, to be effective, it should be tied to strengths, how somebody's succeeding, and asking somebody to improve their behavior. And the behavior piece is key because it's about linking feedback to knowledge and skills rather than talents. So if we're talking about goals and reviewing and evaluating a goal, it might be maybe that goal is not on track to be accomplished. So what is it that we can do to actually get it back on track? What knowledge do we need to fill in? What skills do we need to work on? Rather than a sort of deficit or weakness-based approach that might speak to somebody not being focused enough, or not having focus, or not having motivation. Somebody really can't do anything with that information. They need to know, okay, what knowledge do they need? What skills do they need to work on? What skills are they actually applying and using, and how could they further those better? And I think that also opens up the conversation to identify factors that may be impacting somebody's performance or somebody's goals that aren't actually tied to that individual. Maybe it's something in the environment. Maybe there are other work projects that are somehow taking priority, and it wasn't really identified until this regular check-in with the supervisor and this feedback conversation occurred. The setting is, of course, extremely critical. Choosing an appropriate setting for the feedback conversation. It should typically be one-on-one in a sensitive or confidential location where others aren't around. But some other things to think about too in a feedback setting. Is this a feedback that is best delivered over email? Is it a phone call? Is it that formal check-in meeting between a supervisor and an employee? Or maybe it's even through Workday. What's the appropriate setting? And feedback should be specific and accurate. Compliments are great. They might help build somebody up. But again, we're talking about knowledge and skills. What specific knowledge and skills can somebody continue to leverage and improve upon to do even better? And follow-up is key. So we've given feedback. The goal should be feedback to help someone improve, help someone develop their strengths. So let's check in. What happened? What happened the next time they used that skill or applied that in their goals? And, how can we follow up? As a supervisor, of course, again, there's that regular check-in meeting where, hey, we talked about that feedback from a couple months ago. How's it going? What happened after that? Follow-up is key. And again, it's another opportunity to enter in that feedback conversation and talk about what knowledge and skills can be leveraged and improved upon.
Okay, so now we're going to begin talking about potential biases that might be present when conducting a performance review. So the first one is experience bias. And within the context of a performance review, this is when the reviewer might fall back on the most obvious tasks that the employee performed. So maybe it is that over the course of the year, this employee had a couple really big projects that they were working on, and the reviewer really only takes those into consideration. Maybe the reviewer said, hey, you did really great on project number 1, but man, project number 2 and 3, you really, you need to step it up. But maybe during that time, the employee had a couple of other things that they were dealing with, maybe some smaller projects that the reviewer is not remembering. And so it's important to consider all aspects of the employee's performance and kind of the context in which they were performing their different duties. So, considering the most obvious answers to the performance review is important, but it's not everything, and you want to make sure that you're considering the entire aspect of the employee. So the next one is similar. It is the distance bias, and this would be where the reviewer just kind of falls back on what is the most recent. Maybe the reviewer didn't document very well what the employee was doing over the course of the year, and they had this one big project that they did the most recently, and they're like, hey, you're awesome, you did great at this project, and you just keep doing what you're doing. But maybe earlier on they really struggled, and maybe they could benefit from some constructive feedback on their performance and how to kind of handle situations like that in the future. So it's important to remember, what happened a year ago, what happened 6 months ago, so that the employee can get the most out of their performance review that they can, and so that it's not just taken within the context of, the past month or two. So that's super important. And lastly, this is the similarity bias, probably the one that you guys are the most familiar with. And this is just here to really acknowledge that this still happens. People have unconscious biases towards people who are similar to them. And, we might not want these things to happen. We might not even know these things are happening. But just taking some time to acknowledge, okay, I'm going to try and have an unbiased review. I need to remember, everything about this employee is valid, and I want to treat them, equally to the rest of the team. So that's super key, just a reminder there. Yeah, so in order to address these biases, really the big thing is to really communicate about what has happened over the course of the past year, the performance review period. So, going back to that tracking piece, write things down, talk about your goals and review them over the course of the year, record information so that you're not kind of scrambling at the end, trying to remember, well, what did happen, 6 months ago or 12 months ago. That will help you to be more effective right there. So again, to address the similarity bias, really just practice mindfulness and trying to acknowledge, do I have biases against anyone? Maybe try to find something that you have in common with the employee who's getting reviewed. Maybe that'll help. But really just try to communicate with the employee, try to record information throughout the review period, and that will help to address the biases.
Okay, so as you can tell, we think critical documentation or documentation is critical to the performance review process, whether that is writing down your goal on a sticky note and putting it on your monitor so you can see it 3 times a day or more, all the way to that formal kind of check-in meeting between a supervisor and an employee. But it's important to talk about what not to do in that documentation and what not to actually put on a performance appraisal. And these are all actual examples that we've seen in HR come through on a submitted performance review. Some of these might have had good intentions, whether it be from the employee themselves or the supervisor, but they are in areas we really don't want to delve into in the performance review process. So the first one is making goals unrelated to the position and performance. An example of that is putting somebody's goal to lose weight in that performance review. And that may be a very admirable goal, but it really doesn't have anything to do with their job performance, right? We want goals related to the position and performance related to the position. Another thing not to do is consider activities not relevant to the job. Again, we're talking about job performance. So things like charitable donations, volunteering, again, may be laudable, and that may be an important part of somebody's life, but it's probably not relevant to the position. And finally, it's important to not consider the other non-performance related aspects of the job, such as personal appearance and clothing, how somebody is showing up to work. Again, all of the documentation, the feedback, the goals should be relevant to the performance and relevant to somebody's position.
So we are going to review what we have gone over so far, kind of the criteria that we outlined for an effective performance review. We just want to highlight, again, how important that timing and preparation piece is to an effective performance review, really to address those biases and how setting goals is a big part of that. And again, recall the feedback through the strengths-based approach, and we do have a training on that if you want more information. So I guess a big takeaway is to set a smarter goal in Workday, and we're going to learn how to do that shortly.
Okay, we do have some additional resources if you'd like to explore some of these concepts further. And again, that's available in your PowerPoint handout, and you can download that through the GoTo interface. But now we'll switch over to actually seeing what some of these concepts actually look like in Workday. Before I jump into Workday, I do want to note that the Workday performance review process has a 5-point evaluation system for each of the categories. And you can see those again on the handouts on the performance review templates. But it moves through unsatisfactory all the way to exceptional. Again, it's a 5-point scale. Some definitions to these scales before we actually look at them in Workday. The first, unsatisfactory. That's when somebody's performance clearly fails to meet standards. An employee does not demonstrate the aptitude or interest to perform the job successfully. Improvement in performance must be shown. Now, you can imagine this has some urgency attached to it. This is about, hey, something needs to change immediately. As we move up the scale, we have requires improvement. That's about somebody not consistently performing in relation to the position requirements. But somebody has the aptitude, they have the interest, and they have the skills needed, and they can improve, but there might be some timelines associated with that. Maybe somebody needs 6 months to attend some additional training or work on some other aspects. Then we have meets expectations. That's when somebody fulfills their established standards and job expectations. Now this is totally fine. Work is consistently performed at an acceptable level, and at times it could be performed at an even higher level. This is about coming coming to work, doing the job, and doing it well. And then there's exceeds expectations, somebody who consistently exceeds the standards and expectations of the position. And they may even go above and beyond that to the exceptional level at times, with the exceptional level being the highest possible level of performance. That's somebody that's excelling in all aspects of the position. And generally, we would see a very limited number of employees achieving results, right? This is exceptional performance. But what's really critical here, again, to hit on the point of standards and expectations and goals, what are those standards and expectations? Is that conversation happening? Has that been laid out? Because we can't rate somebody without actually knowing what we're rating them on. And are those smarter goals in place? Do we know what the standard is, and can we clearly see that somebody meets expectations, exceeds those, or is really knocking out of the park and is exceptional in a number of areas? So those are some of the definitions in Workday and what we'll see on the performance evaluation. So now I'll actually move over to the Workday system to show you a little bit about the goals in the performance review process. And I am a supervisor of a fictional HR organization in this example, but also step through some of the employee-centered pieces of the process. So as an employee, if I wanted to see my goals, I'd start from my profile, view my profile, and on the left-hand side, look for my performance option. And on the performance tab, you can see I have individual goals. I can see goals that are in progress. These would have been set up by my supervisor. And again, I'll step through that process here in just a moment. But this is where I can go and I can check on my goals. I can actually edit them. And again, to that evaluation and review piece, maybe I had that conversation with my manager. We figured out where I was on these goals. Maybe I need to shift a date around, some additional time. Maybe I actually completed a goal. I can document that as well. But once I'm done editing, I can hit submit. Back on my performance tab, I also have my performance reviews. I have one in progress now, a performance review for the past year. And what will happen in Workday is the performance review process will start automatically, and employees will receive an inbox item and a notification to go in and actually start the performance review process. So the performance review process will actually start with the employee. Currently at ODE, this function is not turned on, but it will be turned on early next year. So continue to have the same conversations and document that performance review process with our current system. But starting in 2020, we'll be starting with this automatic self-evaluation process in Workday. And what will happen 60 days before that performance review is due, again, the self-evaluation will start. And Workday will guide me through actually completing my evaluation. It'll start with customer service and interpersonal relations. And I'll be able to, again, rate myself on that 5-point scale. And I can make some comments, maybe describe the work that I did over the past year, why I think I achieved the rating I did. I'll then be asked for my rating on communication and teamwork and some various factors associated with communication and teamwork. And again, you can imagine these are communication and teamwork, customer service, interpersonal relations, all critical parts to any job. And then Workday will ask me about my own job performance. How have I done over the past year? What do I think I've done? What would I rate myself as in these various areas? And then I will have the goal setting option at the very end to create performance goals for the coming year. And this will be my opportunity to also create developmental goals. What training do I need? What developmental opportunities do I want to take advantage of? Can I craft some goals around that? And finally, I'll be able to give myself an overall evaluation rating, review a summary, and submit my performance evaluation. And this performance evaluation, once I am done with it, would go to my manager to review and for them to actually step through the same exact form and document their ratings, their comments, and their goals. And once that's complete, we'll have the performance evaluation process documented, and then we actually need to meet and have that in-person conversation. And again, you can review that template and those ratings more in depth through the handouts. But let's say I am actually the supervisor and I wanted to add goals to an individual's performance tab here. I could do that in any number of ways, but through Workday, I'm just going to go ahead and search for add goal. And I'll be able to add goals to employees. I can create new goals, or I can copy an existing goal. Maybe I have a goal for the entire team I want everybody to work on. I could copy that into Workday. But in this case, I'm just going to create a new goal. Workday has a standard template, but it is pretty free form. So this is where I can really use that smarter goal technique to create goals that are specific, measurable, and able to be evaluated and reviewed. So I can type in what that goal is, provide a little bit more detail in the description box. I give it a category. Is this a developmental goal? Again, related to training, developmental opportunities. Is it a performance goal? Or is this a team goal? Something I want everybody to be working on and advancing. And I can give it a due date. When is this goal due? Doesn't necessarily have to be 1 year out. Not all goals fit within a year, 6 months. Perhaps it's a month, 2 years. Whatever that due date is, I can put that into Workday. And finally, I have this box for editable. And as you noticed before, I was able to go in as an employee and edit my own goals. This is checked by default, and that's typically what you would want to have checked so somebody can go in and review their goals and make updates as necessary. But if I were to uncheck that, this goal pretty much becomes static and won't be able to be edited in the future. And if I had more goals, I could simply click the Add button and continue to add goals until I've fully documented all my goals for this employee. Now, as I mentioned, the performance review process in Workday will not start automatically until early next year. But that doesn't mean that if you are a supervisor, that you can't start the performance review process through Workday manually. So that's an option if you choose. And if I wanted to do that, again, I can do it in any number of ways, but I'm just going to type in performance review into Workday search box. I'll get a number of options, but I can start a performance review for an employee. Again, Workday gives me those templates. And because this is a manual process, not tied to that automatic process, I can give some performance review start and end dates. Maybe this is 6 months, maybe this is a year, maybe I wanted to wrap up the current performance review and start a new one to bridge the gap until next year. I could do that and hit submit. And once I've done that, that'll start that self-evaluation process. In this case, it would send Josie that template to go through and do that evaluation. And once she was done with that, it would move up to me as a manager to finish my part of the evaluation. So we've covered two things in Workday in relation to the performance review process. We covered goals and how to view those and edit those as an employee. how to add those goals as a manager, and how to add those goals as you start through the performance review process, and actually starting a performance review manually. Again, the performance review process will be automatic beginning early next year, but the option is there to start that performance review and use Workday if you'd like. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar on performance reviews in Workday. Again, feel free to review what that template's going to look like next year. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact HR. Have a great day.